Upon D-Day, Samantha tells the story of early on, she really did hate me. And that's strong language, but she just did. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that today because the more and more people I talk to, especially betrayed spouses, the more they deal with something I call temporary hate, where it's just kind of like upon disclosure, you're stuck in this temporary sense of hatred towards your spouse. But today I'm talking to both of you, both betrayed and unfaithful, because there's some things I think will be good for you to hear. But, this isn't just kind of a difficult moment or, financial difficulty or parental struggles. I mean, this is infidelity, which in terms of the trauma scale, this is at the top. And this isn't something that you just kind of quickly snap back from, man, it was a difficult month. No, this is probably 12 to 24 difficult months, give or take, depending upon the severity of your situation. And so at some level, your betrayed spouse or you, the betrayed spouse, you have to manage through and work through what might even feel like hate. And I want to give a disclaimer. I am not a betrayed spouse. I'm not going to try and tell you with great specificity, this is what you need to do. I'm not a betrayed spouse, so I hesitate to always do that because I do get lots of comments, some public, some private, that correct me. So I've listened to you. I'm not going to try and do that. But I'm going to tell you what worked for Samantha and I, and I'm going to tell you what works for a lot of different men and women. So take it with a grain of salt and see what it does for you. But I'll tell you at some level, this has to happen. The hate, the anger, the temporary hate, hopefully, has to happen, and here's why. Number one, he or she has to get it all out. Rick told us that early on. He told me, look, Samantha has to feel this, because if she doesn't, it's going to come back months or years down the road. And I've had a number of different women, for example, tell me that, they thought they were fine, and then a year, 2, 3 years down the road, something happened and it hit them with such incredible intensity that it threw them for a loop. And they were able to retrace back and see that they didn't really process it right the first time. And so because they didn't process it then, they kind of stuffed it down. It came back with a vengeance, and it always does. So I want to encourage you, process it now. Feel it now. Deal with it now. Because if you don't, it's going to come back to you, and it's going to come back in spades, as they say, and it'll be much harder to deal with down the road than it is now if you'll process through it slowly but surely. I know I'll talk to unfaithful spouses, and they'll say to me, this is really hard. I mean, she just won't get over it, or she just won't stop dealing with it. And my retort, if it's early on in their situation, is I say, well, you probably shouldn't have cheated in the first place, right? So I want you, the unfaithful, to understand that this is kind of the harvest to your choices. This is the harvest to what you've sowed. So before you kind of get out there and criticize your betrayed spouse's inability to control their emotions, understand that you have devastated them incredibly. And what they're feeling is not just emotion or pain, it's trauma. They say, the experts all agree for the most part, that the betrayed spouse deals with anywhere from 80 to 110 different reminders every single day of the affair. It depends on the severity and how much details they know, but just on a general level, 80 to 110. I mean, their blood pressure spikes with a memory. I mean, it's crazy. I'll talk to so many unfaithful spouses, and the common thread is, what am I coming home to today? Who am I coming home to today? How is he or she going to be today? What's the level of emotion, memories, rage, and anger that's coming at me today? And I'm sorry, that's normal. That's not a knock on your betrayed spouse being a lunatic. It's really not. Some days they are going to be a lunatic, and some days they're going to be so normal you're going to think, we're good. You just don't know. But they have to go through this. They absolutely, and if you're a betrayed spouse, you've got to process through it. And if you don't process through it the right way, it's going to come back to hurt you, and it might even take longer than it needs to. The funny thing is, when a betrayed spouse kind of rages and lashes out, and I was called every good cuss word you could be called by Samantha, it's actually, and hold your breath, it's actually the betrayed spouse trying to connect with you, the unfaithful spouse. I'll prove it to you. If they didn't want to, they would just kind of give you the proverbial finger and bail. But the fact that they are lashing out, the fact that they are pursuing you, the fact, and they might be pursuing you with sharp objects, but the fact that they're at least coming towards you has to be proof that they do care and they still are in this game and they still are in this fight. I've had so many unfaithful spouses say, oh, she's just raging and yelling and nothing works. And I'm like, yeah, but she's talking to you, right? Yeah. And she's reaching out to you, right? Yeah. She's not done. It's just her anger. It's just her emotional flooding, which if you're on the blogs or if you're on our articles or what have you, you're going to hear that term flooding all the time, because there is a flood of emotion that hits them 80 to 100 times a day. And if you think that they're always going to be so calm and say, man, I'm just really struggling today, that's probably not your spouse. So they have to process through this the right way. Number two, the reason why it has to be this way, and I'm going to be honest with you, and this isn't an excuse for the betrayed spouse to prolong with a willful desire to just beat on your spouse or hammer on your spouse or any of that. I kind of needed to see the consequences of my actions. Now I can hear you, betrayed spouses, going, yeah, he needs to hear it. He needs to feel it, really feel it. He needs... Please be careful with that. It's not necessarily going to be your job to make him get it. His consequences are going to get it. Conviction. If he's a Christian, maybe a sense of God's conviction in his heart. If he's not a Christian, or if she's not a Christian, maybe just the consequences, maybe it all setting in. But it's not necessarily your job to make them, the unfaithful spouse, kind of get it. It's going to come through a process, and it's going to come through time, and it's going to come through the right help. But I needed to see Samantha feel what she was feeling, because that prevented me from thinking this was going to be a quick fix. That prevented me from thinking, we're going to be fine, a couple months, and we're moving on down the road, and this isn't going to cost me as much as I thought it was going to cost me. I'll tell you, and Rick absolutely agreed, I needed to see her suffer. And I don't mean that in this weird kind of way. It had to sink in, because I had disconnected from it. I had justified it. I had lied to myself so many times that I kind of needed to see her cry and see her feel what she was feeling. And I mean, it was devastating. I mean, this only makes sense to you that are going through it or have gone through it, man. It just rocks your world. And I needed that, because it needed to get through to me, oh my gosh, look at what I have done to her. Now again, that's not an excuse for you, the betrayed, to continue to transmit your pain, which is, I'm hurting, now you're going to hurt. I don't think that. When it's a genuine hurt and pain, it's a different story. But you feeling like, you know what? I was at an EMS recently, and one of the spouses came up to me and she said, you know, you said you had this one blog one day and you said that, and so I was hammering on him and yelling at him, and I said, and Samuel said to do this. Oh, so I have to be very careful about what I say. So please, you know, be gracious in the way that these things give you direction, maybe. But finally, when you, the unfaithful, and this is point number 3, when you, the unfaithful, can take their emotions, when you can embrace their pain and hurt and not be selfish and not retreat and not prevent them from feeling what they're feeling, you're becoming safe. And when you're becoming safe, they're feeling like they can move closer to you emotionally and mentally and maybe spiritually and even intimately. Until you can take it, I don't think that they interpret you to be safe. Meaning, when they rage, when they get angry and you get defensive or you justify it or you fire back or you retreat in shame or you go hide, it's a subtle form of control. Because what you're saying is, yeah, I've hurt you, but you don't get to feel, and you don't get to suffer, and you don't get to hurt, so I'm going to go over here, I'm going to move myself out of the equation because you don't get to remind me of what my choices have done to you. So unfaithful, allow them to suffer. Allow them to hurt and be there with them in their pain. Don't retreat. Get in the foxhole with them. Hold them. Embrace it. Tell them that you're sorry. Say, yes, you're right. I was this, that, and the other. I'm terribly sorry. I'll do whatever it takes. But get in the foxhole of hurt and trauma with them if you want to be safe to them.